This episode has been generously sponsored by Kiran Chaitanya. Hari Om and welcome to Season 2 of Living Ramayana. I'm your host, Brahmacharini Shripriya Chaitanya, and we're very excited today that we have a special guest in the studio with us, Pooja, one of our study group facilitators. Before we get into the conversation on today's topic, let's jump back into the story and pick up where we left off at the end of Season 1. So, as we saw, Rama and Sita are married very happily in Mithila, and now everyone has come back to Ayodhya. Everyone is ecstatic. So the citizens, everyone in the royal family, they're just overjoyed because it's a time of celebration. One day, King Dasharath is sitting in his court, and he is looking at kind of everyone in front of him. He's thinking about whatever has been done. And he feels that his crown is sort of slipping off his head. So he asks for a mirror to be brought so that he can kind of readjust and make sure he's looking good. And as he's doing that, he spots some gray hair on the side of his head. So not something that any of us kind of want to see, but very interesting how he reacts. He looks at this gray hair and he feels that old age is telling him that it's time to move on. That this gray hair is like a sign that he's done whatever he needs to do, and now it's time to hand over to Ram. Now, when he's had this thought, he's had this idea, what we see in the Ramayana at every instance, whenever an important decision is being made, there is always a point made of this, that the person will not just make the decision independently. So what he does is he goes to Vasishtha, who is the family guru, and he says, I feel that it's time for me to step down. It is time for me to hand over to Ram, not just because of the fact that he's my son and he is the eldest, but because he is qualified in every way. And this again is emphasized in both the Valmiki and the Tulsi Ramayana, where Dasharath feels that Rama is the best qualified to take over from him. So in terms of everything that he's learned, in terms of his character, really, and the qualities and the values that you see coming out in Rama's personality. So on the basis of that, and the fact that he's just beloved by everyone in the city, Dasharath says to Vasishtha that it's time to hand over to him. And so the first thing he says is, when is an auspicious day, right? To have the ceremony where Rama can be crowned. Now, Vasishtha knows what's going to happen. And so there is this foreshadowing that you have happening in the story where when King Dasharath asks what's the most auspicious day for the coronation to happen, Vasishtha replies in a very vague way. And he says, essentially, the day when Rama is crowned is the most auspicious day, because he knows that it's not going to happen for another 14 years. Dasharath takes this to be a sign that, the guru's blessings are there, so let's go ahead. He makes the announcement, all the preparations start taking place. And again, everyone is so excited. Everyone is working super efficiently to get everything done, to have all the preparations take place for the coronation. Not only everyone in the city, but again, all the queens, all the family members who were there at that time. Now, when this coronation announcement takes place, a couple of story details that are relevant here. One, Bharat and Shatrughna, so the two brothers, are not in the city at the time. They have gone to visit Bharat's uncle. So in the city, out of the four brothers, is just Sri Rama and Lakshman. Sita ji, of course, is there, and their parents are all there. So preparations for the coronation start taking place. And as these preparations are happening, Vasishtha goes to visit Ram. And he gives him the news. So it's not his father, it is the guru who gives him the news that this is the responsibility that you now have to take on. And along with that announcement that comes, and this we've seen earlier as well, Vasishtha's emphasis to Rama is, this is the time to prepare yourself for the responsibility that you have to take up, right? So normally when you sort of are, say, promoted in a role, right? You have been pushed up the ladder. It's cause for celebration. In the Ramayana, what we see is whenever there is a change in role and an increase in responsibilities, the advice that is given to that person is, now is not the time to let loose and indulge and celebrate. Now is the time to focus your mind. So what Vasishtha tells Rama is, to prepare for this coronation, now is your time to do your austerity, right? So you need to prepare. You need to fast and you need to pray. And so, of course, Rama is following the instructions of his guru, so he does so, and so does Sita ji along with him. These preparations go on. So the city is being decked out in the most beautiful decorations, the palace is being prepared, and everyone is doing their bit to get ready. Now, here comes the sort of spanner in the works, and that is two things. One, as we saw in the last season, the purpose of Rama's incarnation was to protect the earth and to protect people from this figure that you have of Ravana, who's kind of wreaking havoc over the earth, but also over citizens of, the other worlds that are depicted. And so when the deities see that Rama is about to be crowned, and that means he's, if he's made king, he's not going to leave Ayodhya. He's going to be staying there. They get scared. And they think, we need to stop this coronation from happening, because we need Rama to leave Ayodhya and get to Lanka and defeat Ravan. And so they start thinking about, how can we stop Rama from being crowned king? What they do is they go to Sharda Devi, who is the deity of intelligence and also speech. And they say to her, listen, we really need you to intervene here. And she looks at them and she thinks, I have never seen a more selfish bunch of people in my life. This is such like a beautiful occasion that's taking place. And all they can think about is, our work is not going to be accomplished. But they plead with her and they beg, and she says, fine. Anyway, Rama knows exactly what's going to happen. Sri Rama's, that's the purpose that he's come for. I might as well play my part. And so how it's depicted in the Tulsi Ramayana is that Sharda Devi goes to Ayodhya and she influences Manthara. Manthara is the maidservant of Kaikeyi, who is one of the queens of Dashrath Maharaj, and the mother of Bharat. And she has been with Kaikeyi since she got married. And all that's said is she puts this kind of negative thought into Manthara's mind. So whilst everyone else is fully aligned to this coronation, the deities in heaven are causing this sort of interference, and that reflects on the ground in the city in Manthara's mind, who right now, up until this point, has just been completely oblivious to everything that's going on. Suddenly, she starts looking around the city and thinking, why is everyone so excited? Why is everything decorated? What exactly is happening here? And so she walks around and she starts asking people, and she finds out that the occasion is Sri Rama's coronation. And now, because her mind is reflecting the anxiety and the fear that's taking place for all the deities, she is about to become a major obstacle to this whole occasion. And really just, she's the bad guy. This is what's happening here. Now, whether that's through her own choice or whether it's through the influence that we see the deities playing here, that is to be examined. And how exactly she does that, we will see next time. But a question here for us to think about is, when we are all aligned to one purpose, sometimes we find that external circumstances can sort of thwart our plans. But more often than not, there is something within us that causes conflict. So we know what our goal is, we know what we want to achieve, but we still find that there is a thought or a desire that arises that comes in the way of us working towards that goal or that purpose. So when you find conflict arising like this within yourself, how do you deal with it? What is your way of resolving that conflict that arises within? Something to think about. Pooj, what do you think? Any thoughts on this?
I think it's really hard. You know, we live a life where there are so many influences around us. We have so many hats that we play, so many responsibilities, that I think that sort of inner voice that we have saying, okay, this is the right path to follow, I know this is the right thing to do, really does feel diminished sometimes because of how much external influence there is. I think for me, when I look at times in my life where this has been particularly challenging, I think that there's genuinely no substitute for spending time with yourself. We kind of expect this person to have the answer, somebody to give us a solution, in that like very Matrix sort of moment where someone just gives you that pill that'll change your life. And ultimately you kind of realize that that can only come from yourself. It really comes from you being able to sit down, being able to ascertain, okay, this is definitely the right course for me. This is what's most important to me. And ultimately realizing that you do need to make sacrifices along the way. You're not going to be able to have everything at the same time, but being able to prioritize and say, right now, this is the cards that I've been dealt, and this is the best that I can do. And therefore, this is the choice that I need to make.
I think it's so important, like our ability to just sit with ourselves, right? And our own mind and just kind of figure out what our priorities are. And I think that's, you know, when we read the Ramayana, it's described in terms of like these austerities that are done before, you know, a responsibility is taken. But it's really just that, right? Like if you're fasting and if you're spending time in solitude, it is just that you have the opportunity to kind of sit with yourself and become comfortable with whatever's coming next. And in the world that we live in, we're kind of so busy, right? And just rushing from one thing to the next. We don't often have time to think about what changes in our life really mean and what lies ahead when we kind of, you know, shifting roles, shifting responsibilities. So yeah, I think it's so important to be able to spend time with yourself.
I think the example at the very beginning of the story with Dashrath Maharaj, when he, you know, looks in the mirror and see those grey strands of hair, that in itself is such a beautiful sign of, we always say everything in life happens for a reason, right? How much of the time do we actually take time to look around and take those small things that we can see as an indication of, right, this is the correct course. He very easily could have just been caught up in, you know, his daily happenings and not actually looked into that. But there's so many beautiful examples within the Ramayana of all these characters and their ability to really decipher what those small moments mean and take that as grace, firstly, and really see that as a sign for, okay, this is now my duty, and I understand what that is.
Yeah. And I think part of like, you know, when we take on responsibilities, so often we're so focused on, okay, I have to do X, Y, Z. Like, this is part of my role. I have to make this happen. And we become so focused on the way that we are acting, we forget to kind of also observe and kind of be sensitive to what's happening around us. And, you know, what are, you know, maybe signs or what are people's responses to us? Because one thing is we have to be able to fulfill our responsibilities, but also it's kind of knowing that me fulfilling my responsibilities is happening in a way that's kind of having a positive impact on the people around us, right? And that, yes, I have to focus on my actions, but I also have to look at the way that the circumstances around me are changing and, you know, situations evolve. And can I make sure that I am kind of staying relevant or tuned into the situation that I'm in?
I think the Ramayana is a really beautiful case. And one of the reasons why I think it's such a loved story by everyone is because it really represents time where like the human mind was in such a pure state. Everyone really understood duties, responsibilities. I think it's so easy for us nowadays to feel as if life is a lot harder than that. And, you know, we definitely look at the world around us and there's so much going on that feels out of our control. And so do you think that it is possible to fulfill all of our responsibilities?
I think it's a really interesting question because, like you said, like we play so many roles. But I was thinking about this, like if you look at the character of Ram, right, and just not to sort of give any spoilers about what's going to happen in the story, which I think most people know, so I'm okay with it. But if you look at like the whole thing about the exile, right? Everyone, apart from like one person, everyone is pleading with him not to go. And so when you ask this question, well, what's Rama's responsibility to his mother, for example? What's his responsibility to his wife? What's his responsibility to the citizens, to his brothers? It's so easy to think actually he should just ignore, you know, this exile and just stay where he is. And when you look at him following that instruction and the kind of sorrow and grief that it brings to everyone, it's so easy to feel that actually he's not fulfilling his responsibilities towards everyone else and he's just kind of following this one instruction. It seems very, what's the word? It seems like he's taking a sort of narrow approach to it because he's like, okay, I'm just going to follow this one command and I'm not going to look at anyone else. But actually, if we look at, you know, how we fulfill our purpose in life, if we're constantly asking, okay, am I fulfilling my responsibility to this person or that person in this role? It's much easier to look at the conflict between our different roles than it is to kind of see the coherence. And so in order to answer this question of, you know, can we really ever fulfill all our responsibilities? I think it's really important to have like an overarching purpose. Because if we're just looking at, okay, day to day, am I doing my best to, you know, my parents, my work, my colleagues, my friends, we will find conflict, right? Whereas if we think, okay, I have to fulfill my responsibilities to all these people, but I have to do it being guided by like a higher purpose, that becomes the benchmark against which I measure whether my responsibilities are being fulfilled or not, right? So it's not just on the basis of the other person's reaction to me or whether my mind is telling me that, yes, I've done my best. It is the fact that I have this overarching goal in mind that then allows me to do my best towards everyone, right? So it might seem harsh in the situation that Rama kind of says no to everyone who asks him to stay. But by doing so, he is kind of making sure that actually everyone benefits in the long run. So I think, yeah, to come back to your question, can we ever, really fulfill all our responsibilities? Can we ever really say that we're done? I think it is a question of allowing ourselves to be guided by a higher purpose, which will keep us focused. And then we won't get into these anxieties of, the personal relationships that we're trying to manage and the sort of short-term goals that we're trying to fulfill. We will always find a way to kind of do our best if we know that there's something that we're working towards that overarches like every area of our life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think in the context of, King Dashrath and Ram, something that really underpinned his ability to take on that responsibility was trust. And I think that's definitely something, when I look at my life, or it's often difficult to distinguish between what other people want for me or, other people's desires versus what my responsibilities actually are. So yeah, I think that's a pretty difficult distinguishment to make. In the case of Ram being the heir to a city, his responsibility was very clear. And so he knew what the correct course of action was. But I think for a lot of us, it's slightly unclear what those are. So yeah, do you think that trust is, we have to have trust in our purpose, but beyond that, do you think that trust is a necessary trait for us to have within the people around us? And how big a role do you think it plays?
Yeah, I think it is really important. It's important you see it kind of, one, in the trust and faith that Dashrath Maharaj has in Ram, for sure, right? So it's almost like a step beyond trust. It's like he has this complete conviction, like he knows. It's not that he's having to trust that Rama will do a good job, right? It's like he knows. Mm-hmm. But I think the other part that's also really important is that he has this figure of, they all have this figure of Vasishtha, who is then able to kind of, corroborate and also to kind of, to guide, right? So having that faith in someone who has more understanding, when we're not necessarily 100% sure, it's so helpful, right? To have that trust that I will be guided in the path that is right for me. So for different people, that I guess expresses in different ways. It may be towards like a mentor, it may be towards like a teacher or a guru figure, when we are thinking about what our responsibilities are. But I think also when we are in relationships between not necessarily someone who's guiding us, but relationships between equals, between friends and colleagues, etc. I think being able to trust the people around us is important, because most of us are not in a position where we are kind of immune to the reactions of people around us, right? We are affected by what people say and what people do.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And so to be able to trust the people around us just creates, I guess, like a more secure environment for us to know that we are doing our best. But I think also learning to trust ourselves is so important. The way that Dashrath Maharaj has this thought, right, that I should hand over, and he doesn't question it, right? He doesn't think, but actually I'm the king, like, should I still, Should I keep going for some time, or is this the right thought to have at this point? He is able to trust that thought that comes to his mind. So I think a big part of when, we're thinking about fulfilling our responsibilities is when we know that we can trust ourselves, that whole, the whole process becomes easier. And so I guess a big part of learning to fulfill our responsibilities is also learning to trust ourselves.
I think that's a really beautiful part of the story to me, as well as Dashrath's ability to just let go of his role, being a king. I obviously have no personal experience in that, but I can imagine it's something that comes with a lot of status. And we see that in so many roles that we play in our lives. Something that I really like about this section of the story is it shows that you do need to be able to let go of things. Just being able to give up that sense of responsibility, I think, is something that we find particularly hard because we attach so much of our identity to the roles that we play. So how do you think we can sort of navigate that? How do you think we can navigate the ability to let go? When do we know it is the right time to let go? And how do we know that passing stuff over to other people, or in this case to the next generation, is the right thing to do?
I think it's interesting that there are some situations in our life where it's so clearly defined for us, right? Like say you're at work, you're working on a particular project. It has an end date. And so you know that you have to complete the work by a certain point. And so when that date comes around, you are not expecting it to go any further. You're right? You're like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to move on to the next thing. In other situations, right, where it's not so clearly defined, say you're not, working on a project, or you don't have like a contract that has like a fixed term or something, when it's left up to us, it becomes a bit more challenging because we're not always sure of the right time to move on or to let go. But I think in general, if we start things with the understanding that this is also going to come to an end one day, right? Whether it's a role, a relationship, that could be with friends, it could even be, with parents, it could be with a partner. Knowing that in whatever way, this is going to, it is impermanent. And therefore, whether I like it or not, I am going to have to let go at some point, right? And for me, I feel like the question is, would I rather be able to just kind of open my hands and let go? Or would I rather that I'm holding on and it's snatched away from me, right? And I just feel like if we are, if we're prepared with this idea that this role is not going to be with me forever, this responsibility is not going to be mine forever, this person is not going to be with me forever, even just that thought makes it so much easier to let go when the time comes. Because I may not be the one to decide. Right? It could just be that their circumstances change. And so they have to kind of move on from their place in my life. So just knowing that and allowing it to then kind of ground me in the present. Because the other thing that can happen is if you think, okay, well, everything is transient. One way that could go is then you think, well, what's the point then, right?
Yeah.
If everything is going to come and go, then whatever. I'm just going to...
Why bother?
Exactly, right? But I think the alternative is, well, if it's going to go, then I might as well just fully be in this moment and enjoy it, right? Because otherwise, everything is just going to pass me by. And I feel like it's, even with for example, when you're hungry and you want to eat something, right? Like when you're so hungry, those first few bites of food that you have to satiate that hunger, you very rarely like taste that food, you know, because you're like so hungry and you just want to eat and it's happening so fast. But when you slow down, right, and when you kind of give yourself a second to taste the food, that's the point at which you can start recognizing that, okay, I'm not hungry anymore. Do you know what I mean? So when you're like fully in an experience, then you can move on from that experience. Then you'll know when it's been enough and you're ready for the next thing. But when we're kind of rushing through stuff, right, and we just want to get it done or make it happen, without focusing on actually what the experience is, even when it's finished, we don't feel fulfilled. Like we don't feel like we've really experienced it because we've just rushed through it. So I think a big part of letting go is giving ourselves the ability to ground ourselves in the present in any experience that we have, right? And therefore to give our best. And when we've given our best, I think we intuitively come to recognize that actually, okay, this is enough, right? Like I've done my best and I've outgrown this situation maybe. And now I'm okay to move on to the next thing. So yeah, I think giving ourselves a chance to really fully experience things in the present and therefore do our best to the person, to the situation, to the responsibility, whatever it is, then letting go becomes, it happens seamlessly. Right? It's not something that we have to kind of be forced to do.
I think when you phrase it like that, it's really nice because this concept of perfectionism or am I doing my best is something that I think we hear a lot, and it's definitely a big pressure that we face. But when you're able to ground that in something that's, it's a bigger purpose, the reason why you're doing something, the concept of doing your best, by the sounds of it, seems to slowly disappear because you're able to experience the situations for what they are, live them fully, as opposed to constantly being worried about a million other things that are happening that aren't actually in the moment. And when I think about perfectionism and, am I doing my best? I think such a big part of it is because we're not present wherever we are. You think about work, you're thinking about 100 different things at once. When you're meeting with your friends, you're worried about, oh, I need to be home at a certain time. I need to do this. I need to do that. We all have this insane sense of I need to be doing so much constantly that I think it inhibits us from actually doing anything fully, which then leads to that sense of unfulfillment.
Yeah. And it's I get it. Like it's hard to escape. In the world that we live in, like there is so much going on. And we are very often made to feel that we are missing out if we're not doing everything at once, right?
Yeah.
Like if your calendar isn't completely full and you're kind of
then you're not successful.
Right.
You've not achieved enough unless you're back to back busy every single day.
Right, exactly. And that's what leads to that thing of, okay, even when I'm here, should I be doing something else? Like, should I be planning for, my next thing? And then we end up with this sense of unfulfillment, right? That we're just sort of thoughtlessly moving from one experience to the next. So yeah, I think that thing of being in the present does really allow us to do our best. And help us let go of even the idea of like comparison and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
A very big part of Ram's sort of decision in life, and his entire life he'd sort of been raised to be the king of Ayodhya. Do we think that our responsibilities in life are predetermined when our roles may not seem as clearly cut out as that of a prince and a king? Or are our responsibilities shaped by our life experiences?
Really interesting. It's kind of both. So if you look at this question through the lens of, the idea of karma, then we are born into particular circumstances based on whatever we've done in the past, right? So my past karma determines like the family that I'm born into, the type of experiences that I then have in my life as well, right? Throughout my life. So to a certain extent, whatever we go through in life, whatever comes to us, it's predetermined in that way. But at the same time, there is this idea in, whether Vedanta or Hinduism, whatever you want to call it, that as well as whatever comes to us, there is our ability to exercise our self-effort, right? So we have free will, basically. So we also choose the roles that we take on. We have freedom in the responsibilities that we take up. Which, again, that choice that we make is based on all the past experiences that we've had. So we have freedom, but we don't have freedom from our past in the sense that, so our past, our experiences, our knowledge, they shape the way that we experience the world, and they also guide the choices that we make. So example, on your morning commute, you stop at a coffee shop, right? And you get your whatever coffee you like. It's not good. So now the next morning, that experience is going to determine the choice that you make, right? Whether you go back to the same place or you look for somewhere else to get your coffee from. So your past is that experience is determining the choice that you make, right? But you still have the freedom of whether or not to, one, even get coffee, two, whether to go back to that same place or go somewhere else, to go back to that same place and order something else, right? Like, so many options are there, but all of it is guided by the experience that you've had in your past and your understanding. So in the same way, the roles and responsibilities that we take on, the choices that we make are very much guided by our past. And so they're determined not by like some external force, right? That is like moving us around like pieces on a chessboard. It's my own experiences and my own knowledge that is sort of steering me to make certain decisions. And at the same time, if I become aware of the way that I'm being steered by my own experiences, I can gain freedom to that extent, right? Like if I recognize that, okay, this is the thing that my mind always does in this situation, this is the choice that I tend to make, the more I'm aware of that, the more freedom I have in making a choice in that moment, right? So it's kind of both. It's sort of determined for us by ourselves, but at the same time, we have freedom in that moment to kind of, to make a choice and to choose what we want to pursue.
I feel like when we look at our own lives, we see so many patterns repeating themselves through various relationships, friendships, and it's sometimes really easy to feel as if, oh, this is something that I need to experience for whatever reason, in the context of karma, thinking that it's something that you need to go through. But I guess just having that ability to say within yourself that I'm not bound by the situation, and perhaps what you need to learn is you can get out of it. If there's anything that isn't serving you, you always have the option in life to veer away from it. And as much as I love the cards that you've been dealt analogy, because I think that's such a good way to say it of, right, this is what I've got in my hand, but how I choose to play those cards is entirely up to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah. And it's so empowering, right? Because otherwise
massively.
we just, get stuck. So and there's a really beautiful way of looking at it. And also just remembering that it's kind of, exactly the cards we've been dealt, we've just got to do our best with whatever we have. And nobody is expecting anything else, right? Like often we put these expectations on ourselves, or we feel like other people want things from us. But again, what you see in the Ramayana is everyone just kind of very much just thinking, how can I just do my best for this one, this one ideal or this one responsibility? And that then reflects in every area of their life because they're just focused on that one purpose or one goal. So yeah, beautiful point to end on. Thank you so much, Pooj, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I've very much enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
And yeah, thanks for being here.
Of course.
Okay. Hari Om.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Ramayana. To stay updated on Chinmaya Mission UK's activities, visit our website chinmayauk.org and follow us on social media. Subscribe to this podcast and join us for the next episode. Hari Om.